I actually like in one first or second Conjuring movie, which is kind of loosely based on Lorraine and Ed Warren. They do show them in one house showing that the sounds they're hearing are the pipes
Yeah.
up in the attic, and I was like, that's impressive. They didn't just jump right into Zach Bagans. Well, you must have a demon territory. Uh,
Yeah, no, that came later. But you got to rule those things out, because obviously if you can't be chasing ghosts if that's not what it is at all, and you're not adding any credence to the field too if you're automatically jumping to that conclusion.
Very
and
true.
You're not helping the client either.
Yeah.
Now, I know that I've been on case or in places where you've actually done investigating, and I mean you had equipment set up everywhere. My question is, have you ever got any evidence, and was it voices or was it just sounds?
I seem to be the one that's really good at capturing EVP. I had some thrown at me by a mutual friend of ours, and said, "Hey, you should hear this. It's, we were over at the monument in Gettysburg, and it was near the dogs, the dog monument, the Irish Brigade document, or monument there, and it's like, you can hear the dog barking." And I said, "Well, send me the link." And he sent it to me, and I'm like, "That's not what I hear at all. They're saying your name." And he's like, whoa, what? I said, "Well, I have to listen to the original recording. This sounds like it's been run through a filter, so we'll have to look at that." But that's just something that my ear is a little bit better than most, and I have heard from other people too that if you are in music or in music production, those people are really good for listening for dissonance, what's not supposed to be there. They're a little bit better at clearing that out in their mind while they're listening. Other people, it takes a lot of practice to do that. But I usually jump in there and I can hear that stuff a little clearer than others, but that's just my strength.
Now let's talk a little bit about the cases where you would find that it may not be paranormal, it may be the person involved in that too. Is there a method now where you can set up saying, well, poltergeist activity, well, it could be something paranormal. It could also be just the mind being able to use the energy. Like, I think we all figured out that through martial arts and Taoist monks that you can use qi to push things away. So at what point do you start to analyze the client and simply say, well, you know what, you may have the ability, it may be paranormal, but it's not a ghost.
Right, and that could be sometimes where I get called back more than once. And a medium, a good practiced medium who's been doing field investigation for a while, not just any medium. I have some people that are like, well, my next door neighbor came over and she's been able to see things since she was little and she says it's this. Well, somebody who does mediumship sporadically versus somebody who does it either professionally or in regular field investigation is going to have a little sharper focus on what's going on. And I'll have mediums, and I do have mediums that can come in and they can distinguish between a thought projection or discarnate, a dead person. So they can walk through the house. And of course, if they're walking through the house and they're not finding any dead people, but we're having evidence of things happening, things moving, things apporting, moving from place to place in a blink of an eye, that's a sign of psychokinesis at work. And then the real challenge then, especially if you have a multiple person household, is trying to figure out which one of them it is. And you could have multiples.
True.
You could have two, and I had that in a case in downtown here, where they called me back repeatedly, and they're reporting the same phenomenon happening over and over. And I said, this sounds like PK. And when it started formulating a psychological pattern, a projection of the subconscious that's dealing or wrestling with an issue, a psychological issue, will oftentimes manifest in the activity that's happening. Mm-hmm. And it's, if somebody's having trouble, like with Loyd Auerbach had a case one time with a young boy that really didn't want to be on the swim team, but his parents were pressuring him to do it. there would be water phenomena happening all over the house. The sinks would come on by themselves. Water would appear in midair and just fall to the floor. And it was his subconscious manifesting that desire to tell his parents, I don't want to be in swim class, but he just couldn't do it. And it was manifesting in this phenomenon in this way. And in the case we had downtown here, the son had come out of the closet, and he was struggling with his own sexual identity. The family, from what I understood, seemed very comfortable with the fact, who knows what the family dynamic is when you step outside the house? You don't know. Unless you really, really dig in and play therapist, which I can't do. But, there's no problem there. But you could tell by all the photos that were being rearranged in the living room, all of the immediate family members' photos were inverted upside down. Every single photo sitting on the shelf were upside down, except for one. And I said, well, who's this handsome gentleman here? Oh, well, that's his grandfather. He's the only one that doesn't know right now. So his perceived relationship with his family was upside down with everybody that knew. But his grandfather didn't know, so that relationship was okay.
Huh.
Wow. So when you start seeing psychological things like that, then it's more or less a living agent than it is a discarnate.
So when we start talking about these battling energies, or I should say subconscious arguments that are going back and forth, when we start talking about, and I hate the word tulpa because it's getting really overused, but when you start looking at family dynamics or group dynamics and you start thinking these arguments themselves could be creating something that just sort of lashes out at all of them as opposed to just direction.
That's correct. And I have a medium that I work with that's very, very good at discerning that. And we had a case not too long ago. We had a young client that was bipolar. And she was medicating to a degree. I had the feeling that she wasn't medicating full time because there would be times where she would just take off in the middle of the night and a couple of days later she'd come back. And she was living with extended family, and she had several children also. So she would take off and...
We talking self-medicated or?
A little bit of both.
Okay, yeah.
And that caused a lot of consternation in the family. It caused a lot of anger issues, a lot of arguments. And the medium came into the house with me, and I didn't tell him anything about this. I took the initial information, and he said, there's this dark cloud that is hanging over the dinner table. And he turned and looked directly at the client and says, you need to stop talking to each other like that. That is bad. It is feeding this thing. And... it was slashing out so badly that the... Sorry?
Jeff, you're breaking up.
Saying, where else do you eat but at the dinner table?
Jeff,
I heard a little bit of that about the dinner table.
Yeah. Jeff, you're breaking up.
There was a lot of cross argument going on at the dinner table, and there was even an event where the client and the mother or the grandmother were getting into it in front of us and arguing. Mm-hmm. And I was doing my best to try to calm things down, and I noticed to the side the medium was backing up and backing away. And after we got out of there and had our dinner afterwards where we compared notes, he says, you didn't see me do that, did you? I said, well, I kind of noticed you backing away. And he said, you didn't see the black thing that merged from the floor between the two of them while they were arguing like that. And the moment you got them to calm down, it went away. And he could see all this psychically. And
that's fascinating that it's an actual... I mean, I know the concept of that, but it's an actual manifestation that people can see.
Yeah, and sometimes if you have psychic ability, you can see it better than others. And I do hear people often off and on telling me that, oh yeah, I've had this shadow since I was probably young, and I see it from time to time. But when my boyfriend moved in and we started fighting, it really, really started getting visible, and even my boyfriend could see it.
Mm-hmm.
And
it sounds a lot like Paranormal Activity, and it kind of makes me wonder if these people are just really excellent projectionists who can do all of that energy out there. And yeah, that's how they direct their anger. It's very focused.
In psychology we call it disassociation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've undergone trauma as you're younger, or even in your older years, if you've learned to disassociate your emotions, you can manifest this separate entity from you. And since that entity has been created from your negative emotions, it seeks to be fed with those negative emotions. So it will try to charge an atmosphere to the point where you're arguing, or you're depressed, or you're drinking, or you're doing whatever to feed it, because it knows nothing else.
That would make total sense. You know, the kids saying, well, my invisible friend did it. And how many of those are actually not ghosts, but it may be an outward manifestation that the child can see of his own emotions and that confliction. No, honey, we don't act that way. But he needs to project that energy out somehow, so it becomes an imaginary friend.
Mm-hmm. And it could make sense, too, why at a certain age children don't see their imaginary friends anymore. Because they've worked through that emotional maturity to the point that they don't project anymore.
It's like the little blurbs they have on Instagram of people who, kids have an imaginary friend with pigtails, and it turns out that pigtails are actually a hanging rope because that's where someone woman had committed suicide hanging herself on the stairs or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Everything is perception. And I remember in the bipolar case that we were talking about, the children were seeing an entity named Diego. And it was funny to hear the grandmother and the client talk about this thing like it was this menacing, evil thing, Diego. And I'm like, why are you talking about him like that? Because he's a demon. You've heard of Diego. He's a demon. I'm like, no, I have never heard of a demon named Diego. And I got to thinking about it after I was going through my notes. I called back and I said, do your children watch cable television? Well, yeah, they do. I said, do they watch the Cartoon Network? Well, they watch Nickelodeon. I said, do they watch Dora the Explorer? Well, yes, they do. I said, do you know the name of Dora the Explorer's little friend? It's Diego. And Diego is a little boy with brown hair and brown eyes. And that's what the children were reporting as seeing, is this boy with brown hair and brown eyes. Oh. And here they were talking about this thing like it was a demon. And I'm like, no, they're associating what they know from TV and naming their friend what they recognize. And it was quite telling because the medium who came in and who also witnessed the disparaging energy and the anger issues and stuff, he found two children upstairs, a little girl and a little boy. And the little boy had brown hair and brown eyes. But the family was absolutely adamant this had to be a demon. I mean, they were absolutely adamant they had the conjuring going on in their house. And I said, nobody has the conjuring going on in their house because it didn't really happen. But I mean, I shouldn't say it really didn't happen, but it's been, built upon over all this time. But the movie itself is not really representative of the actual original case either.
Sure.
But because it's not exciting enough.
Oh yeah, well, a lot of people don't know that. All they see, and I've done lectures on based on a true story is basically what I called it, and we've gone through the movies one by one and judged it on the truth meter, based on the original cases and what the movie actually evolved into being, and sometimes even the remakes. it was fascinating to see when they did Amityville Horror, it was based on a novel by Jay Anson. But the second reincarnation of Amityville Horror, based on a true story.